So thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm delighted to welcome Jamie Stewart, the author of Be More Buffalo, and here's my copy. Unsurprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, this is probably going to be one in my top three books of 2026. It was one of those books that when you picked up, you thought, "Why the bloody hell haven't I written that?" Because a lot of it is what we actually know, but it's put in a different type of framework. It's put in a different format, so it actually means more to us. So, be more Buffalo. I think if we be more Buffalo, does that mean we become Buffalo soldiers? Jamie, I don't know. Does that mean we become Buffalo soldiers?
I
And
don't
if
know
that,
what. I think everyone's got their own interpretation of it. I was literally just speaking to somebody. We were off up to Scotland at the weekend, and she said, "My friend's got a buffalo farm. Would you like to go visit?" I was like, "Yes, I definitely want to go visit."
it's a must, isn't it?
Yes.
So, Jamie's book was recommended to me, and I bought a copy. And I then reached out to Jamie because I thought it was such a tremendous book. And basically, the way I always read a book, the way I was taught to read a book, is I read it from cover to cover, and I then go back and I make notes. And one of the things that I always try and do at the end of my notes is to come up with three key actions of things I'm going to do. Because all in good reading a book, but it's what you're going to do about it. What action you're going to take. Because if it's going to be a worthwhile use of your time, and we are all time poor, then basically we need to get into gear and do something about it. So, the first question I normally ask, Jamie, is tell us a bit about your background and your business journey and how you arrived at where you are today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. So I've got a varied background. I've worked in a variety of different industries and sectors. Uh, if I go right back, I went to university a long time ago and did electronic engineering. Never used that degree. Got a job out of uni, worked in manufacturing that gave me a broad breadth of experience. So whether that was sales, technical support on the shop floor, and then I moved from there into an engineering part of the group, and that they were building huge hydraulic cylinders for jacking suspension bridges up. And I realised that there was no money in engineering, no money in engineering for my aspirations. Left there and joined a telecoms company. Was project manager there. We ended up setting a big call centre up and relocating the business to from Crewe, where I lived, to Manchester. And then the guy that owned it, John Caldwell, the Phones for You group, decided that he was selling up. And whilst that was great for him, not necessarily for me, because I got made redundant as they were streamlining the business. So I joined another group of companies, a mail order group, that ended up buying Clean Easy, the door to door catalogue business. And at
Wow.
33, Paul, I was put in charge of a £75 million turnover business with 15,000 salespeople that operated in four different countries. And it was a baptism of fire. Ran that for 7 years. Then I'd spent 7 years encouraging people to start their own business and do their own stuff. And it rubbed off on me. That was where I got into personal development. That's in the network marketing industry. There is a lot of personal development. A lot of these books that I've got were recommended to me at that point, and that's where I started my journey on personal development. And then fast forward a bit longer, I got involved in helping people build a network. So rather than just go in networking or having a network, I find that a lot of people aren't that strategic on building the right network. And if you can imagine, the ultimate goal is that people build a small team of people who can introduce them to their ideal clients. So I like to call them ideal client connectors. So if you had a handful of people like that, Paul, that just, and if you think about it, they could just introduce you to your ideal kind of clients, then that's business development taken care of. Um,
But I think the interesting point in that sentence that you just made is a lot of businesses haven't actually worked out who or what is their ideal client. They haven't actually defined it.
I hear the A word a lot. I would just like an introduction to anyone, in your case, I'd just like an introduction to anyone who wants an accountant. And I challenged them at that point. I said, really? That's really interesting. Let me just help you filter that. Do you want to deal with the pain in the backside people? Well, no, I don't want those. Okay, well, that rules a lot of people out. What about the people with no money? Well, they need to have money, but there's a lot of people with no money either. What about the ones that are just hard work and demanding, that always want you to scrimp and scrape, or they pay late? don't want those either. I was like, well, we just narrowed that down hugely. And then you could ask people, where would they like them? So does it matter what country they're in, what time zone? Do you want them within traveling distance to you? And all of these things just help people paint a little bit of a picture of who it is that they really want, or be able to say, I don't want these ones. And I think that in itself just helps people filter in our heads. So if I think we've all collected a lot of connections over the last 5 or 6 years since COVID. We're all doing a lot more social media content, a lot more networking, and we all just know a lot of people. It's hard to have that. I'd like an introduction to anyone and someone spring to mind. So you're right. We definitely need to put a little bit of effort in on describing our ideal client, and and when we get clear on that, this weird thing happens. People start to introduce you when you make it easy for them. I used to be that person. I just want anyone. Anyone who.
So a friend of mine always used to call that the red polo effect. So before his wife had a red polo car, they never saw any on the road. As soon as she bought one, they're blooming everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. If your eyes open to actually what you want and who you want to work with, I think you'll find them everywhere. And I think part of that problem is almost defining who you don't want to work with, what you don't like. So typically, unlike a lot of accountants, when we meet a new prospect, we always say, while you're interviewing us, we're also interviewing you. And most people look at me and think, what's he on about? So I say, I use two criteria whether I'd like to work with you. A, whether I like you, because life's too short to deal with people who are a pain in the arse. And B, whether I can add value to your business. Because I said, we all know that customer rings up and everything's always a problem. I don't need those. You don't need those. And actually, you need to set your stall out because let's remember, this is your business. It's your life. It's your rules.
And nobody points that out when you first start off in business.
No.
I remember, like in the early days of starting my business, I would take anyone. I would. If they were interested in paying me some money, I'd take them on as a client. And what happens is you end up with people that when the phone rings, you look at it, go, oh, don't want to speak to them. Or they call you out of hours, or they're always, could you just do this? And then they never pay you on time, and you end up wasting a lot of time on the wrong kind of people. And the good ones that are easy to deal with, they almost get overlooked because you're distracted by these people that suck a lot of time out of you and energy as well.
So the awkward squad we call BMWs, which stands for bitches, moaners, and whingers.
Yes, I've used that before.
And actually, there's a lot of those people about. And I think we as business owners, we need to understand what we actually want to do and then basically go get them. So, what inspired you to write the book?
So I've read a lot of books over the years. I've bought a lot of books. And one thing that you said at the start was it's not just about buying a book and reading it, it's putting it into action. And that stands out for me because, as you can see on the bookcase behind, I've bought a lot of books. I haven't necessarily read them all. And I've bought some books. And at one point, I thought it was easier to consume audiobooks because I'm driving and then I can tick another books off my list, but I wasn't actually putting stuff into practice. So I wanted to create a book that was like a workbook, a manual, a guide that helped people. But one of the important parts for me was that people put it into practice. And I remember hearing somebody saying, oh, I've forgotten his name now, but he studied a book and he took inspiration from Earl Nightingale. And Earl Nightingale would have a book on his desk that would be open on the pages in a bookstand. And then he would study it and then implement it. And I thought, that's what I want to create. And I make a decision now that when I buy a book, that I'm going to study it and work out what I'm going to apply in it. And you've read the book, Paul, so it's laid out in such a way that it's easy to read, but then there's some action steps at the end of it. So I wanted a book, and I think when you were messaging me, I was just flying back from an event that we'd run out in Dubai, and just before I got on the plane, you said, "Hi Jamie, it's Paul. I'm just about to read your book." And by the time I'd got off the flight, 7.5 hours later, there was another message waiting for me that said, "I've just finished your book, Jamie. I love it." And that's what I wanted to create, something that was easy for people to read. Not just to read though, to put it into action. So that's what led me to it. And people ask me why is it called Be More Buffalo? And I was working with a friend of mine on some speaker training a few years ago. And at the time that I was doing it, I was looking for something that I could turn into a keynote. And this is where it came from. And I was listening to another podcast, and they were describing in it how somebody had sent them some t-shirts with lightning bolts on the front of it and buffaloes. And they called it Charge the Storm. And I was like, it's not Charge the Storm, it's Be More Buffalo is the mindset that we need. And all these different pieces kind of fell into place at the right point for me.
So, as you know from our previous call, I actually have a mug, which has Face the Storm. And I think that's what it's all about. So, in your view, what actions do we need to face the storm, and why should we face the storm?
There's one thing that I realize about being in business. We have all got challenges to face. And it feels like uh, we're not young people, are we, Paul? We might act young, but we've been around for a while. Years ago, I felt like the storms were few and far between. So there would be a recession, 5, 6, 7 years later, there'd be another recession. And it feels like now, every few months, there's some big drama that we've got to face. And if you're in business, the bigger the business is, the more challenges you face. So, unless we have a process, a strategy to tackle some of these things, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. And I wanted something that people could pick up the book and have the page. I wanted the book to look really dog-eared. I don't want it to look pristine. I've got books on my bookshelf where I've read them once and I always try to keep them looking new. With mine, I actually want people, and it says at the start, scribble in it, write stuff in it, put post-it notes in, fold the pages over, because there's stuff that you can just keep referring back to. And that's what I wanted to create for people, something that supported them with the things that they might face. And I think, and I don't know what you think about this, I think that sometimes we just get used to dealing with things, and some of these things can sit over us. I would imagine in your world, Paul, a lot of your clients put off dealing with their accounts, dealing with their admin. There's fun, exciting stuff to do: sales, marketing, the latest new shiny object. The bookkeeping, oh, I can do that later. And then it builds up and builds up and builds up. And these things sit like a weight on their shoulders. And then when we actually deal with them, because we have to deal with them, it's not that bad. And I heard this phrase, dread time. It's the dread time that can be worse than actually tackling these things. So if we've got a process that can help us tackle some of the storms that we're facing, we don't even realize that they're sitting as a weight on our shoulders, but then we feel this sense of relief once we have done. And that's what I'm wanting to help people to do. We all have storms to face, and they are coming thick and fast. The better equipped we are to be able to deal with these things, the happier we'll be. The knock-on effects, not just on us, but on the people around us, will be huge. And we just don't even realize it.
It is as well. And I think I may slightly be a year or two older than you, I would guess. So I've been through 4 or 5 recessions, and everybody talks to me about recessions, and I say, hold your nerve, stay the course. It will be all right in the end, but you just have to see it through. And I think a lot of people we are almost taught at school to panic a little bit that everything's a problem and we need to overreact, all that type of stuff. But actually, what we need to do is we need to stand back, which I think your book was good at, and actually help us to understand what are the issues, what are the challenges. Because you rightly say, we've all got challenges. I'm young enough to remember the old Bounty advert. They came in search of paradise. Do you remember that on the beach with the palm trees and the sand and the sun and the beautiful lady? For a lot of us, paradise is slightly different to the image portrayed on there. And actually, we just need to acclimatize ourselves, if that's the right word, to dealing with things. And I think sometimes we rush things too quickly when actually, if I look back at my career, some of the decisions that I've rushed into are probably the worst decisions I've ever made, whereas some of the decisions I've held back and actually thought about things properly rather than reacted quickly were the right ones. So your book talks about a PODA reset, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
And
So
PODA, in your words, has a set meaning, doesn't it?
it does. Pause, observe, decide, and act. And one of the things, so if you've got a copy of the book, it's on page 41. You're right. A lot of us just get used to reacting to things. So something happens, we deal with it straight away, or we rush it, or we leave it too late. And sometimes we just need to take a minute. Rather than rushing into making a decision, let's just pause and think about it. What actually happened? What actually happened? How bad is it? Because in the heat of the moment, somebody might say something. And if depend upon how we feel at that point, depends on how we might react to it. Quite often, I've drafted an email to somebody and then slept on it, and then overnight, it's not even worth sending something. Maybe they were just having a bad day. So pause.
On those emails, I was always taught to write the email full of emotion. And then you sleep on it, you come in the morning, you say, I can't say that, can't say that, you stick to the facts.
Yeah.
And actually, too many people fire off too quickly their emails without having considered, is that the right response and what effect that's going to have on someone else? And I think in business today, we don't pause enough. And what I mean by pausing as well is when we're talking to our team, we sort of launch forth when actually we should stand back a little bit, pause, say happy birthday in our mind or count to 10, whatever we need to do to actually, and that pause will actually do a lot of good for us. And think so does the pause in business. So you also have your clear framework, don't you?
Well, so let's just finish that. So pause, take a minute. What just happened? How are you reacting to it? What view it from a different perspective. Observe. What are the facts? What did you learn from this? Decide what's now. Do I actually need to do anything or not? And if so, what are you going to do? And then act. And sometimes these might be little things, and it might just be the first step. And your action might just be, I'm going to sleep on it overnight, or I'm going to ask my accountant for advice, or, but it's just having a process, I think, sometimes, rather than just react, react, react. We live in this world where, our mobile phones are designed to keep us on hyper alert. Have you ever had that feeling as well? Where, I mean, my phone sits on silent, and for a long time it was on vibrate. So I used to get this thing in my pocket where I'd feel like my phone had just vibrated, but it hadn't, and it wasn't even in my pocket. So then I stopped. So my phone, unless I turn it on, it doesn't ring and it doesn't vibrate. I turned a lot of the notifications off because I found that I was just reacting to stuff all the time. So we can make a choice about that. So that's what PODA is about.
And I think if we look at the last 30 to 40 years in business, in the good old days, I'd send you a letter, you would probably respond in a week's time. Then we went to a fax machine, and I'd send you a fax today, and you'd probably respond tomorrow. Now we're in a more immediate environment whereby I email you today, I'm almost expecting a response today. And I think we don't consider things enough. I think we put too much pressure on ourselves. We put too much pressure on others as well. And I think the pause is right. And I think your reset is a good idea.
I do. I was like, right, we live in this reactive world. Maybe we should be a bit more proactive, and we take charge of things and we work out what's important, when we're going to deal with it, and how we're going to react to it.
Agreed. So a moment ago, I jumped the gun a little bit about your clear framework, but perhaps you'd like to explain that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So as part of the book, I take people on a journey. So before I do that, let me just explain. So if you've not read this, it's written as a parable, and I don't know about you, Paul. A lot of the personal development books that I've bought fall into two camps. There's a textbook which I start but never finish, and then there's stories that I get engrossed in, and I enjoy reading the book and read it from cover to cover. And I first came across this with a book called Go for No. Good friend of mine, they're now good friends of mine, Andrea and Richard, that wrote it in the US. And they wrote that, and they're American. They wrote it so that you could read it on a plane, because they get on planes like we get in the car. So the idea was you could read it, and it's about 100 pages. So my goal was to write something that was easy for people to start and finish. And it's written taking somebody on a journey through struggling with something, as a business owner might do, and how they build the right network of people. But one part of it comes to how do you set goals? And it's easy just to fall into a habit of just doing the next thing in business. I'm, I am quite driven. I have got lofty goals. But even then, I remember when I first started my business, my goal was different. So the reason for leaving the corporate world and starting my own business was I used to leave the house about 6 o'clock in the morning and get in about half six, 7 at night. And I missed out on a lot of the kids while they were really young. So I'd spent 7 years encouraging people to run their own business, and I just wanted to be around. I wanted to do the school run and the school pickup and to make sure I didn't miss any parents' evenings or sports days. And that was my why when I first started. So this part of it relates to working out what it is that you really want and then how can you go about getting it. So this is on page 135 in the book. And clear stands for clearly defining the outcome. So work out exactly what it is that you want. Link it to a purpose. And I remember years ago hearing somebody say to me, nobody will help you become a millionaire. Nobody wants to help you get rich. But if you can bring people in on a more emotional level, so right now one of my goals is to grow my business so that my fiance can leave her job and be involved in the business and have all the benefits that we have as business owners without some of the stress perhaps of have I got enough holidays left? Have I got to clock all my time? So if I said to you, Paul, can you help me grow my business? I want to be a millionaire. There's probably not really a lot of emotional attachment to that. If I said, Paul, I'm looking to grow my business because I want to help my fiance quit a job and come and work with me, and we can go on this journey together. You could probably relate to that.
I can, yes.
And so that's the linking part. So people will quite often set goals. What does it link to? Why is it important to you? And usually I find that our goals are important to us because they impact somebody close to us. That's why we do it. That's quite often why we start a business. Our motivation is to provide for our families so that our kids can have a better tomorrow than we did yesterday, so that we can do something for our partners. Then establish some milestones. The goal sometimes can be so far ahead that it's unrealistic. And I think if we can break it down into smaller chunks that we can celebrate along the way, then it's more realistic to aim for something at the end of this month, the end of the quarter. So you need a big goal, but break it down into small chunks. So that's established milestones. Then create action steps for this week. Action steps for this. What's just the next step that you need to take? It's not necessarily the big thing. It's just what's the next step, and that starts to build momentum when you start taking more small steps. I might reach out to you, Paul, and say, right, I've got this big goal. I wonder if you could help me with it. The next step is that I need to help with this thing. So that's the A. The R is review and adjust. I don't know about you, Paul, but I've created a lot of plans in my career and it hasn't gone to plan.
Or they've sat in the drawer and you've never looked at them again.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So I'm a visual person, so I like to have things, and I think I went through a period where I bought an iPad and I had a digital, I was writing digital notes and stuff. It didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. I'm old school. I need a piece of paper and a pen, and I find that by writing stuff down in that way, it sinks in. But then I'll take it and I'll turn it into something visual so that it's not filed away somewhere. Even in a notebook, you turn the page, you finish your notebook, it gets put in a drawer. So the important stuff to me is I'm looking at the back. I've got a pin board with things on there. To my left, I've got a vision board that I designed that's really visual. And the weird thing is when you start making stuff visual and having it around you, and it's broken down into little steps, we start to make these things happen.
I think we do. And what I loved about the fact that your book's a parable, a story, because one of my favorite quotes is a Steve Jobs quote that says, the most important person in the world is a storyteller, for the story sets the value, agenda, and culture for generations yet to come. And that's the important thing, generations yet to come. And if you look back at some of the earliest civilizations in the world, they kept their culture, they kept their history alive by telling stories.
Yeah.
And stories actually make things more relatable, more understandable, and we can identify with the person in the story.
I'm smiling because we've spoke about this. My core business is we run help people build a business network, and in traditional networking, I think we're taught to turn up and do a good pitch. I encourage people to turn up and tell stories because people are drawn in by stories, not by facts and figures, not by a list of features and benefits. But if you tell me a story about someone that you've helped and how you helped them and the results that they had as a result of it, I'll remember that because it's in our DNA.
It certainly is. So I was taught facts tell, stories sell.
Me too. Me too. That's exactly it.
So in your book, you talk about your networking and you talk about a 5, 15, and 50, which I think is the way that you actually suggest that people build their network.
I I don't know about you, Paul. I have got thousands of connections, and if in a previous life, I used to teach people all about social media, and I remember the early days of social media. Like now, we take it for granted where we've just got all these connections, but in the early days of social media, I remember telling people that on average, people had 250 connections. Can you imagine just having 250 connections on LinkedIn, Paul?
I can't know.
It would be like you just started last week. So 250 would have been people that you went to school with, people that you've worked with, clients, and maybe a handful of people that you'd met through sports or after school clubs with your kids or something like that. 250 people was our world 20 years ago. And now we've got thousands of connections. And there's an anthropologist called Robert Dunbar who did some research on how many relationships humans can actively maintain. And he came up with this number of 1,500 people. And then what he did was he categorized them into concentric circles. So in the very middle of that, there's five people. And if you imagine how many best friends do we actually have? We don't have hundreds. They're not in the tens. Usually we can count them on one hand. So I thought, I like this. I'm not interested in the 1,500. I couldn't write 1,500 names. This is about how many people that we can maintain relationships with, that we are important in each other's world. So the 5, 15, and 50, imagine those as concentric circles. So in the inner circle, they are five business best friends. Five business best friends. We're going to invest a bit of time in the relationships with these people. We need to like them. If I'm setting out on a journey with you, and if you and I both deal with the same ideal client, I'm going to need to like you. We take it for granted sometimes that in business, I don't know, none of us set out to have more friends when we start a business. We just want clients. But what we realize is if we can develop some brilliant relationships with people, and if they can become your business best friends, and you all deal with the same client, then it's very easy to open the doors for each other. So in the center is five people that you speak to on a weekly basis. That as I'm going about my work, and let's say, Paul, I'm speaking to people every day that I know that are a good fit for you because we're building a relationship. At some point in my conversation with them, it shouldn't be too hard for me to go, I've got someone that I think you'd like to meet. And I might say to them, how often do you speak to your accountants? And they go, once a year. They send me a bill, I send them some stuff, and then I don't hear from them again. And I might say, well, I actually know someone that runs a bit different to that, and I think you might find him quite useful. And he's not your typical accountant. Doesn't even wear a tie. And as we know more about each other, I'll bring you up in conversation and find it easy to introduce you and get you meetings with people. Not to send you emails, but to get you an appointment with somebody that goes, Paul, this person, This is their experience of dealing with an accountant. I've explained how you've helped this person, and they really like to meet you. And then likewise, you would do the same for me as we get to know each other through this process. So that's the idea. The inner circle's 5. Then you come up with a list of another 15 people. And for some of us, we might struggle with some of these names. They might be people that we know, but we don't have a great relationship with yet. So they might be people that we're connected to, but we don't know much about them. We don't know what kind of people. I'll give you an example of this. I spoke to a friend of mine last week. He's launching a new business that he's developed and patented a product for people when they're playing on 4G and 5G AstroTurf pitches. If you fall, you get a burn. So he's developed this product called Graze Guard, and you spray it on, and it stops you getting really bad skin burns. And so I'm speaking to him, and I said, right, if I could introduce you to anybody right now, who would you like to meet? I was expecting, because he's got a big shipment of products coming in, he's just about to launch. I thought he'd want to speak to people that might want to buy his product. He said, I really need someone who can help me with some of my marketing stuff. And then we had a bit of a conversation about it. And he said one of the things he was struggling with was some visuals. And I'd literally just spoke to a young guy about an hour before and described how he could help him, put the two of them together that afternoon, and they're already starting to work together.
Isn't that wonderful?
And it was no effort. It's just knowing the right questions to ask people when you're speaking to the people that you already speak to allows you to make introductions to other people. And then when you do that enough for other people, this thing called reciprocity kicks in. Now, if you and I were in a pub, Paul, and I offered to buy you a drink, at some point, you'd probably, hopefully, want to buy me one back.
I would, yes.
We've all been around some people that don't,
Yep.
and then they move out of our circles. And the ones that do, that reciprocate, they come closer into our world. And that's what this is about. This is about being strategic with the people that you know or need to get to know to build the right relationships that they just naturally introduce us to our ideal clients. And that's the purpose of this. And there are some people that sit on the periphery of it. We don't know them well enough yet. They don't know us well enough yet. We might not have the right relationship with them, but we can bring people in. And one of the things I think that years ago, as we grew up, there was no social media.
No.
So if you didn't see somebody, let's say you moved towns or you changed jobs, then you would just naturally over time lose touch with people. And in this social media world, we stay friends with people forever, don't we? Because they're on social media.
Or I call it friends in inverted commas.
Exactly. So this is not about having lots of connections. This is about having great relationships with people, and that's what I've developed. And it's a light touch of it in the book. I do a lot more to help people with this. And for example, there will be people that you know that could, in theory, introduce you to lots of dream clients, but they just don't know you well enough yet. They don't know how to bring you up in conversation. They don't know what a dream introduction looks like. They might not even know what you charge, or if you're looking for clients right now or help with anything else, because we're just not in each other's worlds yet. And if you've got a strategy for this, then you can pinpoint some of the kinds of people. And it might be, let's say, in your world, a business coach would be a great person. So they're dealing with their clients. They're helping them, in theory, to scale their business. But if they haven't got the right accountant in place, who's helpful and supportive and giving them advice and guidance at the right touch points, then it's quite easy for them to bring you up in conversation, qualify them. I don't just mean to send you lots of emails that say, Paul, speak to this person, he needs an accountant, that they can go through this process. They know what you want, they know what you charge, and life just gets so much easier at this point.
In the words of the Spice Girls, what you want, what you really, really want, isn't it?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And, I think we've all experienced word of mouth marketing. This is a strategy to do.
And that is so powerful.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
it is.
So you obviously believe networking is a must for all businesses, don't you?
I think for the right people, I don't think it's for everybody, and it's not the only thing. I still send emails, I still do social media, but I rely heavily on word of mouth marketing because I've got a strategy for it and it works very well for me. There are some people though that it's not a right fit for. They don't have the time to reciprocate for others. So I think there's for my kind of people there's a criteria, Paul. I've got to like them. Right. These are my referral partners, my ideal client connectors. I've got to like them. I've got to want to spend time with them. We both need to deal with the same kind of ideal clients. Um, I've got to be open to learning about them and their stuff, and they've got to be open to learning about it from me. So that's my criteria. If I don't like them and they're messaging me or calling me, at some point I'm going to start to dread speaking to them. So it's really important to me. And life's too short not to enjoy what we're doing. That's part of the reason we start our own business, isn't it? So it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
So you've obviously had some tremendous successes of people that you've worked with, people that you've been able to introduce some of your networks. Would you like to share one or two sort of anecdotes with us?
Yeah, I've seen. So over the last 12 months, when I first moved in with my fiance, now fiance, she had a property and she rented it out. And then a year ago, Lou decided that it was time to sell that house. So I asked a friend of mine, could he recommend an estate agent? So Alan introduced me to Michelle. Um, she came along to one of our events. I met her. I liked her. Think about the sequence of this. A friend of mine introduced me to somebody that he thought was a good fit. He knew that she was good at what she does and would be a good fit for me. I met her, did my own vetting, if you like, and then I thought, right, she'll get on well with Lou. Put them in touch. Lou came off the phone. I really like her, Jamie. She's just what I needed. And she sold our house for us. She did an amazing job. She was relatively new in her. She's part of an estate agency called EXP, where she's got her own business and brand, similar to a franchise, not quite the same, but and she did an amazing job. And then she's gone and grown her business phenomenally over the last 12 months since she's been in. She's just gone past her 12-month membership. And I remember hearing her at the end of last year. She was complaining because she was going to have to go VAT registered, Paul. Complaining because she was doing too well. Now I'm going to have to go VAT registered. In her first, what would she be, 18 months in business, something like that at that point. So that's one example of somebody quite new. And she's built a network. She's what she won't, what I don't think everybody sees is the personal journey that people go on. So I've seen Michelle develop in confidence in how she explains what she does, how she speaks to others, speaking at events, and the knock-on effect of that is in her own business, she's more confident. She can go away and speak to people and make introductions, and she's built a small team of people that make introductions for her. The other end of the scale, I've got Paul McGowan that you've met. Paul's been in Circle Networks, I think it's 3 years now, and he's in financial services, helps people with wills and lasting power of attorney and insurance products. I wouldn't say that they're the most exciting products. We need them. We hope that we never need to use them, and we're grateful that when we've got them. And Paul had been networking for a long time when he first came to us. I think at the time he was 25 or 26 years in business, and he tried all sorts of different networks. And it was almost like a challenge when he came. He was like, I'm ready to quit networking forever, Jamie, but someone's told me I need to try Circle Networks. And he came along and loved our format. So it's quite conversational. We put people in small groups and you build relationships. And for 6 months, he came and sat some of the training that we run. And for 6 months, he got no business, Paul. No business for 6 months. Helped a lot of other people. Past introductions that turned into clients for other people. Attended multiple events. And then in month 7, got his first bit of work. And I think some people are in the world where it's high trust. You've got to have a lot of trust. I've got to have a lot of trust in someone to introduce them to you, for you to take care of their accounts and provide that level of service. Paul falls into that category as well. And then he shared with me the other day that he went on to have best ever month in business in month 8, beat it again in month 9, and again in month 10. And this momentum just took off. And he's averaged over the last, he said 18 months. I need to get an up to date figure on him. But on average, he's added an extra £6,000 of business a month since he's been in Circle Networks. And
That's 108,000.
he's done very well. He's done very well. All he's
That'd be
done,
very nice, wouldn't it?
he's just
So
been
I think those are amazing stories. And I think working together, working with people and introducing them is it all comes back to know, like, and trust, isn't it? And trust is really important because if you're introducing someone to me, if I'm introducing someone to you, my credibility is on the line the same as yours is, isn't it? And we've all known people who've introduced that haven't necessarily worked out, and some of that's come back to bite us a little bit, hasn't it? So we need to be careful,
you've
and
got
we're
to.
always careful about who we introduce and to make sure it's the right fit.
I think one of the things is we will go to a pub or a restaurant or watch a movie and rave about it to everyone. You need to go to this pub, you need to go to this restaurant, you need to watch this new movie that's come out, and we're very enthusiastic about it. And I ran a training on this last week, and I had somebody do that exact thing. Uh, so I said, right, imagine you're introducing me to someone that you know, and they were quite serious. So I know this person, and I think that they'd be quite good for you, and it was like that. And they weren't particularly enthusiastic. It was a good recommendation, but it wasn't enthusiastic. And then I said, right, pick a pub or a restaurant or a movie and tell them. Their face lit up straight away. And I said to everybody else, did despite anything that they've just done, did you see the change in their body language at the point that they started recommending the pub? Yeah, yeah, they started smiling, they relaxed. And I think if we can bring that level of enthusiasm to our introductions, hi, Paul, let me introduce you to this person. I think that they'd be really good for you. And I've introduced them to other people because of this. You just need to meet them. With that level of enthusiasm, if we do that for others, they'll do it back for us.
Certainly will.
If
The
I say,
BNI always used to have was it giver's gain? Was that their idea, the BNI?
yeah,
That basically, if you give something, then actually, as humans, we're almost wired to give something back as well.
I think reciprocity, it's a great thing. We shouldn't be giving expecting to receive. We should do it because it's the right thing. And I listened to Simon Sinek, and he talked about why we like giving to charity because it releases endorphins. And I find that when I'm helping other people, I get that same good feeling, and it doesn't cost me a penny. So I'm always happy because I'm always helping people. And the more I do it, it does feel addictive to be making a difference. If I pass you an introduction, Paul, and regards, let's say you have, what can I do to help you this week, Paul? And you tell me, and then I go away and do it, you're going to be happy, and I'm going to be happy. And then you're going to want to pay me back at some point, just because we deal with the same kind of people.
Excellent. That's really good. So we're coming to the end of our talk today. So if someone wants to learn more or reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you, Jamie?
So LinkedIn is my preferred method. So find me on LinkedIn. If you search for Jamie Stewart Circle Networks, you'll find me in the results. That's my best thing. If you would like to come and experience something in my world, then come along to try some of our Circle Networks events. We've got right now that we're recording this over 100 events a month that are online and accessible to everybody. So I'd love people to come along and just take up our free trial. We offer people a 2-week free trial to come and meet some nice people in business. What's the worst that could happen? You get some introductions, you learn something new, you enjoy some conversations.
I think that's tremendous. So thank you very much for your time today, Jamie. And as I said, I suspect, and okay, we're only in March and there's a few months left of this year, but I suspect your book will be in my top 3 this year. And when you and I spoke before, you're already thinking about the sequel, and I can't wait for that. So thank you very much for your time today. I've really enjoyed myself, and
Thank you.
thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Paul.